Yes, let's talk about hockey, the show that journeys through the history of the sport of ice hockey from its disputed origins to the game we see today. When you think of Montreal hockey, the first thing you might think of is the Canadiens. But they were not the first successful hockey club to come out of that city, and for majority of the team's first 3 decades, they were also not the only club in town. 2 other Montreal franchises would share the city with the Canadiens at different points in time. The first was actually around some 6 years before the Canadiens, the Montreal Wanderers. Founded on December 3, 1903, the club was formed due to a dispute over the control of the Montreal Hockey Club, and, along with other teams that were denied membership in the Canadian Amateur Hockey League, helped found the Federal Amateur Hockey League a couple of days later. The core of this new Wanderers team was comprised of members from the Montreal Hockey Club's Stanley Cup winning roster from the previous year, a group known as the Little Men of Iron due to their tenacity and small stature. In the first FAHL season in 1904, the Wanderers would go a perfect 6-0 to win the league title. Additionally, they would play in their first Stanley Cup Challenge match against the Ottawa Hockey Club in March of 1904. This challenge concluded in a 5-5 tie, but the Wanderers ended up forfeiting the series when they refused to continue unless the tie game was replayed in Montreal. 2 years later, the Wanderers, now a member of the Eastern Canada Amateur Hockey Association, would square off again against the Ottawa Dynasty in March of 1906. Montreal would dominate the first game of the Challenge Series, winning it 9-1. However, Ottawa would storm back in Game 2, leading by a 9-1 score of their own. But Montreal would manage to knock in 2 more goals, making the final score 9-3, and giving the Wanderers the ECAHA title and the Stanley Cup based on total goals for the series. From here, led by future Hall of Famers Lester Patrick, Hod Stewart, and Ernie Russell, the Wanderers became the second Stanley Cup dynasty, winning the ECAHA championship over the next 2 years and coming out on top in 6 of 7 Stanley Cup challenges as well. Their only misstep was their loss to the Kenora Thistles in a January 1907 Stanley Cup challenge by scores of 4-2 and 8-6. But Montreal would get their payback 2 months later, beating the Thistles in total goals to reclaim the cup. Their dynasty, though, would finally be put to an end in 1909, when their second-place finish in the ECAHA standings returned the cup to the first-place Ottawa Hockey Club. However, the end of that 1909 season also brought the end of the ECAHA, as the decision by Wanderers' new owner P.J. Duran to move the team into his smaller Jubilee rink upset the other clubs in the league, since they would receive less ticket receipts from games played in the new rink. To show their displeasure, the other ECAHA clubs suspended the league's operations and formed the Canadian Hockey Association, while also barring the Wanderers from joining the new league. So, once again, the Wanderers became involved in the formation of a new league of their own, joining 4 other teams to form the National Hockey Association in December of 1909. Funny enough, though, the league that was formed to lock out the Wanderers, the CHA, folded only a few weeks into the 1910 season, and 2 clubs from that very league, the Ottawa Hockey Club and the Montreal Shamrocks, immediately joined up with the NHA. The first NHA season would go well for the Wanderers, as the club went 11-1 to claim the O'Brien Cup for the league championship, and since they played in the same league as Ottawa, this also meant that the Stanley Cup passed back to them as well. Montreal would successfully defend their claim on the cup in 1 more challenge match against the Berlin Dutchman Club in March of 1910, before their 4th place finish in the now 5-team NHA during the 1910-1911 season passed the cup along to Ottawa once again, who finished first in the league. The next year, the Wanderers would move back to their old rink, the Westmount Arena, and continue to fall on hard times over the following 3 seasons, posting losing records each year. But in the 1914-1915 season, they seemed to return to their old glory, finishing tied for first place in the NHA with the Ottawa Senators, forcing the NHA to hold a 2-game playoff series to determine the league champion. In the first game of this series, on March 10, 1915, Ottawa would shut out the Wanderers 4-0. And though Montreal would return the favor in Game 2 with a 1-0 shutout, with Ottawa outscoring them 4-1 over the 2 games, the series was called in favor of the Senators. Over the next 2 seasons, the Wanderers would fall into a slump once again, winning only 15 of their 44 league games. Then, like the ECAHA before it, the NHA was ended after the 1916-1917 season due to frustrations that the other clubs had with one of the owners. Though this time, the culprit was the Toronto Blue Shirts' Edward Livingston. The Wanderers then joined the other upset NHA franchises in forming the National Hockey League, and in the new league's first game on December 19, 1917, played to a 10-9 win against the Toronto Arenas Hockey Club. Montreal would drop their next 5 straight games, before their season came to an abrupt halt with the destruction of their home rink in a fire on January 2, 1918. Already having trouble putting a decent team on the ice, this fire ended up being the final nail in the coffin for the Wanderers, as the team disbanded soon after, leaving the NHL a 3-team league and the Canadiens as the main hockey force in Montreal. Though the loss of the Wanderers was a near fatal blow to the NHL, the league persevered, and by 1924 even began to grow, adding a team in Boston and another in Montreal, making it a 2-team city once again.